This week, 3 countries made move in the same direction. The United States launched a $12 billion critical minerals stockpile. Japan pulled rare earth sediments from 6,000 meters below the Pacific Ocean, the deepest extraction attempt in history, and Taiwan announced a pilot-scale rare earth production line aimed at meeting half the island's demand within 3 years. Layered on top of that, TSMC is upgrading its second Japanese fab to 3nm chips, holding its first ever board meeting in Kumamoto, and a joint Pax Silica statement signed between Taipei and Washington. Adding it all together, this might be the most coordinated supply chain realignment among democratic allies in recent memory. And the question is whether the AI spending boom that makes all of this possible keeps its momentum, because this week, that boom showed its first real cracks. Hi, you're listening to Beyond the Reefs, a show produced by Radio Taiwan International. Here we talk about socioeconomic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world beyond the reefs of this island nation.
Critical minerals, key to modern-day technology. From electric vehicles to defense systems, and now the center of a push to wrest control of their production away from the world's second-largest economy, China. From efforts by Japan to source them from the seabed, to Project Volt, U.S. President Donald Trump's new initiative to create $12 billion stockpile. The plan involves building up a 60-day emergency supply of critical minerals.
For years, American businesses have risked running out of critical minerals during market disruptions. Today, we're launching what will be known as Project Vault to ensure that American businesses and workers are never harmed by any shortage.
Trump and others are responding to China's domination of the market for critical minerals. It's responsible for more than 60% of production and more than 90% of processing. That gives it significant economic and geopolitical leverage. Like last year, when Beijing announced new export controls on the minerals, seen as a response to U.S. tariffs. Then in January, China halted rare earth exports to some Japanese firms. It was a direct retaliation for comments by Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae that Tokyo could become militarily involved if China attacked Taiwan. To reduce reliance on China, countries like Japan are finding ways to invest in their own mining projects, while some businesses are looking to wean themselves off of critical minerals.
The export slowdown caused considerable chaos. In response to the situation, we worked on reducing the amount of rare earth we use. Another pillar was to move away from using rare earths altogether. So we've been developing motors that do not use rare earths.
Taiwan is doubling down, adding critical minerals as one of the 4 pillars in its plans to expand cooperation with the U.S. Taiwan's economy minister says the country will build a rare earth production line within 3 years that can meet half of domestic demand. Taiwan is one of a growing number of countries looking to get on board with U.S. efforts in this area. On Tuesday, U.S. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum announced that over 24 countries plan to join a new alliance on critical minerals trading.
We have plans to announce as many as 11 more of those agreements this week coming out of the bilateral. We know that there is strong interest from another 20 countries coming behind that. And again, the concept there is that we would have tariff-free trade and exchanges amongst those countries around these critical and rare earth minerals, again, to create a block.
China's foreign ministry has not yet responded to Washington's initiatives. Looking ahead, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is set to host an inaugural Critical Minerals Ministerial on Wednesday. The meeting will likely provide a benchmark for how quickly and strategically countries will move, as the push to reduce reliance on Chinese minerals grows.
TSMC plans to make advanced 3nm chips in Japan, an upgrade from its original plan. Japan's Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae met with Wei on Thursday for talks about the plan. That would involve expanding its facilities in the southern prefecture of Kumamoto with a total investment of $17 billion.
establishing a cutting-edge 3-nanometer level factory in Japan, which has been concentrated in Taiwan until now, is significant from the perspective of strengthening the global supply chain of strategically important semiconductors and of enhancing our nation's economic security. And I therefore welcome development along the lines of this proposal.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
Greeted by fans and journalists in front of this Taipei restaurant, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang is causing a stir with his latest visit, his first time back in Taiwan this year. He says 2026 is going to be a big year for Taiwan's chipmakers.
TSMC needs to work very hard this year because I need a lot of wafers. Over the next 10 years, TSMC will likely increase their capacity by much more than 100%. And so this is a very substantial very substantial scale up in the next decade.
The occasion of the night, a gathering of NVIDIA's top suppliers, whose combined market capitalization has the evening being billed as the trillion-dollar dinner. The attendees is a who's who of Taiwan's high-tech industry leaders, including TSMC CEO C.C. Wei, Quanta Chair Barry Lam, and Chair of Pegatron, Tong Zixian, who briefly took questions upon his arrival. When asked about reports suggesting NVIDIA's $100 billion investment in OpenAI is on the rocks, Huang had this to say.
That's nonsense. Yeah, that's complete nonsense.
Huang is expected to stay until Monday. Regarding the construction of NVIDIA's Taipei headquarters, the company has yet to confirm if Huang will meet with Mayor Jiang Wan'an to discuss details during his visit. With less than 1 day to go, his fans in the country may hope to catch a glimpse of the so-called godfather of AI before his next visit.
Now, the three announcements weren't coincidence. They're interlocking pieces of the same strategic puzzle, and each country is playing it to its strength. Starting with the US, Washington launched Project Vault this week, a strategic mineral stockpiling program with nearly $12 billion in initial funding, combining about $1.6 billion in private capital with $10 billion in loans from the Export-Import Bank. The plan is designed to create roughly 60 days of emergency reserves for materials like rare earths, lithium, and nickel. It's a buffer, a way to buy time, because right now, according to the International Energy Agency, China controls nearly 2/3 of global rare earth mining output and more than 90% of refining capacity. That's not a supply chain, that's a chokehold. Then there's Japan. The research vessel Chikyu successfully recovered rare earth sediments from the seabed near Minami Torishima at a depth of about 6,000 meters, a world's first. Japanese officials estimate over 60 million metric tons of rare earth resources sit within Japan's exclusive economic zone. And if commercial development works out, Japan won't just reduce its reliance on Chinese supply, it would become a source of supply itself. And Japan has a particular reason to care because in 2010, after a maritime dispute in the East China Sea, Beijing cut off rare earth export to Japan almost overnight. That moment, when a single geopolitical flare-up nearly crippled Japanese industry, has shaped Tokyo's resource strategy ever since. Japan has no rare earth on land, but it may have them under the ocean. And then there's Taiwan. No rare earth reserve to speak of, no deep sea deposit, but Taiwan has something else: process technology. The kind of refining and recycling capability that turns raw materials into usable component. Taiwan's economic minister Gong Mingxin said this week that Taiwan plans to build a pilot-scale rare earth production line within 3 years, one that could meet about 50% of domestic demand. The Industrial Technology Research Institute, the ITRI, is already developing indigenous refining and recycling technologies, and trial production has been completed at a scale designated to meet roughly 1/3 of demand. Now here's what makes this significant. Taiwan is doing with rare earth exactly what it did with semiconductors a generation ago. The island has no silicon reserves. It has no oil. What it built, the things that made it indispensable to the global economy, was the technology layer. The ability to take raw inputs and process them into something nobody else could match. Taiwan is reapplying that same logic to critical minerals. Take what others mine and become the best in the world at turning it into something useful. And the U.S. noticed. American officials said during the EPPD dialogue that once Taiwan's model matures, it could be replicated in partner countries to enhance the resilience of global rare earth supply chains. That's not just supply security for Taiwan, that's Taiwan building the next exportable advantage, a new form of leverage that sits alongside semiconductors, not beneath them. So the architecture looks like this. The United States provides capital and bulk purchasing power. Japan provides geography, a potential new source of raw materials sitting on its own seafloor, and Taiwan provides the technology to process it all. Each country filling a gap the others can't, and for Japan specifically, the rare earth breakthrough could be a two-bird, one-stone solution. A resource-poor island nation gaining both the raw material and the advanced chip manufacturing that it lacks. That is, if the deep-sea mining plan works out. This is where TSMC's Japan move fits into the bigger picture, and where Taiwan's physical reality becomes impossible to ignore. TSMC announced this week that its second fab in Kumamoto, still under construction, will now produce 3nm chips, the most advanced process technology in commercial production. The original plan was 6 to 12nm chips, workhorses, not crown jewels, but it'll get the job done. The upgrade came after TSMC CEO C.C. Wei met with Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi, who called the news thrilling and immediately pledged government financial support. Total investment in the second fab has risen to $17 billion, up from $12.12 billion. The facility is scheduled to come online in late 2027. In economic terms, no landing usually describes a scenario where the economy never cools down. Growth stays hot, inflation stays sticky, and the expected slowdown simply doesn't arrive. Well, Taiwan's 2026 number fit into that description almost perfectly. The National Development Council set a GDP growth target of 4.56% after last year's over 8% GDP growth. Manufacturing PHI hit 57.2 in January. That's the highest since April of 2022. And Honghai, one of the biggest technology companies here in Taiwan, posted record January revenue of about $23 billion. Meanwhile, consumer prices rose just 0.69%. That's a 5-year low. But for Taiwan, no landing has a second meaning. A quite literal one, that there is no land. The island that produces the world's most advanced semiconductors, that's about to host NVIDIA's Asia headquarters, that anchors the entire AI hardware supply chain, is physically running out of room. Taiwan's manufacturing prowess has outgrown the island itself. And TSMC's Kumamoto expansion isn't just about diversifying away from geopolitical risk, it's about escaping a physical constraint. When the factory floor is full and the island is 36,000 square kilometers, growth doesn't stop. It has to emigrate. And the Japanese partnership combining chips and rare earth technology is what Taiwan's industrial exodus looks like in practice. President Lai Ching-te said this week that a joint statement signed between Taiwan and the United States demonstrate both sides' shared commitment to strengthening economic security. And the statement endorses the principle of the Pax Silica Declaration, a U.S.-led initiative aimed at securing global semiconductor supply chains for advanced technologies. Current signatories include Australia, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. Oh, and of course, the United States, among others. Taiwan hasn't formally signed the declaration yet. The U.S. Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs says he anticipates Taiwan's participation in Pax Silica-related discussions to continue, but that a formal signing would be decided at a later point. What's more revealing is the scope of what was discussed at the EPPD. That wasn't just about chips anymore. The dialogue covered AI supply chains, digital infrastructure, critical minerals, drone supply chains, and cooperation with third countries. Taiwan's startup export grew 29.3% in 2025, reaching $4.68 billion, with Southeast Asia posting about 125% surge. Drone cooperation advanced too. ITRI signed a green UAS authorization agreement with a US-based industry association, opening certified drone sales in both markets. The picture that emerges is a Taiwan that isn't just a semiconductor factory anymore. It's positioning itself as a network node. the point where rare earth processing, advanced chips manufacturing, AI server assembly, and drone technology all converge. And it's doing this precisely because it can't grow inward. An island with no land, no rare earth, and no oil is building an architecture that makes its physical constraint irrelevant by making itself essential to every link in the chain that matters. But here's the complication. This entire realignment is built for and funded by the AI boom. And this week, that boom hits a bit of a wall. Google's parent company Alphabet reported strong earnings, cloud revenue up nearly 50%, advertising still growing double digits. Then it announced capital expenditure plans of $175 to $185 billion for 2026, nearly double the previous year. However, the stock dropped. Amazon followed with even larger numbers, $200 billion in planned AI-related capex, a third more than Wall Street expected. The stock felt harder in after-hours trading. 6 months ago, those announcements would have sent shares soaring. The markets have flipped its core narrative. Spending more on AI used to signal ambition, now it signals risk. The logic shifted from invest more and the stock goes up to show me returns first. Software stocks are down 20% in a month. Bitcoin officially entered bear market territory, erasing all gains since the Trump era. Precious metals saw historic single-day crashes. Gold dropped 11%. Silver catered 26%, driven by leveraged positions unwinding in what traders call a gamma squeeze. None of this means AI is over. No, the underlying demand is real, very real. TSMC won't be upgrading Kumamoto to 3nm if it weren't. Hon Hai wouldn't be posting record revenue. Taiwan's manufacturing PMI wouldn't be hitting 3-year highs. But the funding mood has shifted, and building a China-proof supply chain isn't cheap. Japan's deep-sea mining needs years of commercial development. Taiwan's rare earth pilot line is a 3-year project, at least. TSMC's second Kumamoto fab comes online in late 2027. Project Vault needs sustained political will and private capital. All of these bets assume that AI-driven demand continues to justify the investment. The strategy doesn't need AI at peak hype, but it needs the spending not to collapse. But maybe that's exactly the argument for having to move right now. Taiwan's macro position gives it the runway. GDP growth above 4%, manufacturing expansion for 4 consecutive months, the business outlook sub-index jumped 10% in January to 61, and the strongest expansion pace since March 2022. While on the other side, inflation is tame. The tariff picture is improving. Washington verbally agreed to cut tariffs on Taiwanese goods from 20% to 15%. Economists at the Academia Sinica described 2026 as a potentially very hot year for Taiwan's economy. That sounds like it's a window, not a permanent condition, a window. And Taiwan, Japan, and the United States appear to be treating it as exactly that. The EPPD dialogue, the Pax Silica endorsement, the Rare Earth Cooperation Framework, the TSMC board meeting in Kumamoto, these aren't reactions to a crisis. They're moves made from a position of strength, while the strength holds. Taiwan has no land, Japan has no rare earth, at least not on land, and not since Beijing demonstrated in 2010 that supply could be weaponized overnight. Both constraints have defined these nations' strategies for decades, but this week's convergence suggests something new. The constraints themselves are becoming complementary. Japan's ocean floor has what Taiwan needs, Taiwan's process technology builds what Japan can't, and the United States has the capital and the strategic motivation to tie it all together under frameworks like Pax Silica. The question isn't whether this is the right strategy. The convergence suggests that it is. Well, I guess the question is whether a no-landing economy, one that can't slow down and can't physically stay put, can finish building the architecture before the weather changes. You build the ark before the rain, and right now, Taiwan is building it everywhere except home. Thank you for listening to the show. I'm Joey Chow. Tune in next week to find out more about socioeconomic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world beyond the reefs of this island nation.